Cool. All right, so Emily Wiggans, you're up next. This is our last presenter. Emily's from Chesapeake Conservancy. It's a nonprofit located in Annapolis. They do a lot of work around conservation of the Chesapeake Bay. Made the news in the last 3 years about their sort of AI for Earth kinds of work that they've done in the Chesapeake Bay. So Emily's going to present today about a community science application for monitoring water quality in the Chesapeake Bay. And I was really hoping to get a few more kind of community mapping, citizen science kind of presenters today, because I've been kind of inspired by that lately. And I was really glad to be connected to Emily to give this presentation today. So thanks a lot, Emily.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Just making sure you guys can see my screen okay, and I'm gonna hit present. Okay, yeah. Great.
Yep.
There we go. All right. So thanks for sticking around, everyone. Like she said, I'm gonna be talking about empowering community water scientists with a new web GIS map app, that I developed. And the Chesapeake Conservancy is out of Annapolis, but since we're working from home, I am a stone's throw from the DC border in Silver Spring, Maryland. The first thing I wanted to bring up was why we're referring to it as community science. I'm sure a lot of folks have heard the term citizen, but water doesn't stop at, national borders or state borders. And in our efforts to be more inclusive, we're using the term community science, as are a lot of organizations like Audubon. So if you haven't heard that phrase, I would encourage you to adopt that to just be a little more inclusive of all the different efforts that are going on. So the most incredible fact to me that I have learned through my work on this is that 70% of waterways in the US are unassessed by the states or federal government. And that's according to an EPA survey from 2016 of all of the streams and rivers in the entire United States. So that's a huge gap that we don't know, is the water healthy? What's the pollution like? So enter community scientists, specifically those that monitor water quality. So community scientists do everything from just simply taking photos and reporting on things like trash to actually collecting water samples. Sometimes they collect macroinvertebrates or mollusks. They oftentimes end up with data in composition notebooks or file cabinets. Sometimes they get into Excel for further analysis, or sometimes they get onto websites to be publicly facing. But what all community scientists have in common is that they are limited by resources, whether it's human, in terms of volunteers, financial, or technological resources. So enter the Water Data Collaborative. And the Chesapeake Conservancy is part of the Water Data Collaborative, along with a couple other national nonprofit organizations. And we are committed to making the work of community scientists easier by elevating them at whatever stage they are in their monitoring journey. So we kind of track that by looking at this is the first version of the graphic, so it still says citizen, but our community water science framework. So step one, that's the first place that this app can live. This app looks at the land cover, and we know it's well established that up to a land cover of greater than 10% imperviousness, so the water can't infiltrate through the soil, that's when you start to see degraded water quality. So if you're starting out monitoring, you can use this to plan where the most at-risk watersheds may be. You can also look at it in step 5 and step 6 after you've collected the data and you're starting to go out and try to share the results of your findings along with the conditions on the land. And then we really hope it can be used to drive precise conservation and restoration decisions that some of these organizations are doing. Like if you're going to plant trees, where's the best watershed to plant trees, or do other restoration projects. So you go to the app, and I put a link to the story map that links to the app in the chat. And this is it. Probably some of you may be familiar with our Chesapeake Conservancy 1 meter land cover resolution product for the entire Chesapeake Bay watershed. So that's the green shades. And then I've got all of the catchments for the entire Chesapeake Bay watershed. So it's made up of 2 custom web apps, or web tools rather. And that's the link to the Water Data Collaborative. It's also in the chat. Either way, you can find the app for yourself and check it out. There is a demo video that's just 7 minutes on how to best use the web tools, but I'll briefly go over them here. So essentially what you can do is zoom in anywhere and click on a NHD plus HR beta. It is beta version, but it is, released and pretty good data on a catchment. And then you can select for either the catchment itself or the catchment and everything upstream that drains into it. And so then it returns, it takes a moment to run, but then it returns the land cover percent. So this is for a catchment in Rock Creek in downtown DC. It's for the catchment and everything upstream of that. So you can see this catchment has 14.34% impervious cover for it and all that drains to it. Probably will come as no surprise to anyone living in DC. It's a super urbanized watershed. The next tool actually allows you to visualize all the area that's draining to that catchment. And so that's the upstream visualizer. And you can see it goes all the way up north into Montgomery County, into Germantown and beyond for that. So that's all draining to the one catchment in Rock Creek. In the picture on the right, you can see the orange points, and you may be wondering what those are. So those are the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System points. It's a data set that's from the EPA, and it represents some point source pollution. Land cover is a great proxy to kind of determine water quality, but it's more non-point pollution from things like just roadways and impervious surfaces. So it's really going to be valuable, we think, to make it easy for community scientists to access the point source pollution as well. Threw in a West Wing gift for all the DC fans, hopefully. So what's next? I'd love to expand this effort from beyond the Chesapeake Bay to also the EPA's Enviro Atlas Community Land Cover data set. So it's also pockets of 1 meter resolution land cover throughout the United States. You can see the little blue dots. They actually resampled some of our own in the DC area. There is a challenge with classification schemes. That's something we have to work out. It's kind of red apples to green apples. So we want to make sure we're doing that in a good way. So that's one thing we want to work on in the future. And then if you're familiar with the Conservancy, we are planning an update to our 2013-2014 land cover to be released next year. So that'll be for 2017 and 2018. And then we actually have a future one planned as well through the Chesapeake Bay program for 2020 and 2021. So that's obviously going to be in the future as well. For 2 other quick community science monitoring solutions, I wanted to mention the Clean Water Hub from the Isaac Walton League, which is a WDC partner, Water Data Collaborative, and Water Reporter from the Commons. Here's just 2 quick screen grabs of those products. So the Clean Water Hub is a state-of-the-art database that's built for volunteer monitors to share and organize their data. And Water Reporter, kind of similarly, is essentially a social network that's optimized to support different watershed initiatives. You can do campaigns around like finding trash and then cleaning up trash and all sorts of things. So a lot of community water science going on with the Water Data Collaborative. And I just wanted to throw out my email again, and I'm happy to answer any questions you guys may have. I know that was a lot of info quick.
Hey, Emily, question. So I just moved to Maryland, so therefore I'm overly enthusiastic about the Chesapeake Bay.
Same.
I lived in Virginia for way too long, and I never considered the Chesapeake Bay. I blame the fact that I lived in Virginia. So say I wanted to volunteer some of my skills or my ridiculous amount of enthusiasm. What ways could people who are involved in the GeoDC community get involved and volunteer?
That's a great question. If you go to the Water Data Collaborative website, excuse my mess of tabs. I don't know if anyone else is like this, but It's a problem.
I may have like 4,222 open on.
So if you go to the homepage of the Water Data Collaborative and then you scroll all the way to the bottom part, River Network, which is one of our partners in the Water Data Collaborative, has this great map where you can find your local water keeping organizations. So Elizabeth, although I think I heard that you go by Liz, for example, I also grew up in Virginia, for the record, and didn't know the Chesapeake Bay was a thing. I was just like, oh, the Atlantic Ocean. But living in Silver Spring, I found, I think it's the Friends of the North Branch of the Anacostia River. They're a local group and they like just do trash cleanups. So you can just find on this map, you can search any location and see some of the groups that are working in your area.
I led one of those 3 weeks ago.
That's awesome. I mean, and then there's also groups like the Potomac Conservancy, and I'm partial to the Chesapeake Conservancy, of course, but like time is great, money is great, especially with a lot of environmental organizations that are hurting this year, just like everyone else with COVID. So I would say if you could find your local water keeping org and reach out and see what they're looking for, that would be great. We work a lot in Annapolis with the Arundel Rivers Federation, and we have done a lot of work for them as well. So big fan of this map on our website, and hopefully that answers your question.
Awesome, thank you so much, I appreciate it.
Emily, did you say that the site is already rolled out from Chesapeake Conservancy, the app, or is it?
It is, it exists, it's in the chat, and I'll pull open the story map here in my zillions of tabs. Story map is live. You can see, like I said, there's a lot of background. We tried to be really transparent and really clear in what we were doing and where we got the data from. Here's a little demo video, and the app is embedded in the story map, but it's a standalone app as well. So whatever your preferred use is, it's all up there. And target was community, water scientists, but it's certainly open to anyone who's interested in seeing what's going on in their backyard or near their work or whatever.
That's great. Does anyone else have questions for Emily?
Or if you have any feedback, you're welcome to shoot me an email. I happily take, constructive or super critical feedback, but it's always good to hear from folks in the GIS world about your GIS, since it's a little more informed, God bless, than my parents.
Well, I think we can all agree that all critical feedback can still be constructive.
Agree.
Hopefully.
Emily, you showed those orange points. It was like non-point source pollution.
Yep.
Are those points that people are reporting, and if so, what are the plans to use that data? Like, what happens to that data?
So that's data from the EPA, and I don't believe there's any community science reporting on that specifically, but we know that the EPA monitors them. So the thinking was, it's good to be open about where those points are for these organizations to know where they are in their communities and their watersheds, because if they do identify a sediment plume or a weirdly high temperature or strange chemical readings, they can look at, well, did it rain? Did a bunch of rain come off onto the pavement, or did the local pollutant discharge location, not follow their permitted rules? And that data for these nonprofits, sometimes they don't have a specific GIS person. So we really wanted to make it easier for them to access that.
Yeah, that's really cool. Any other questions?
Nope, just cool stuff.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, Emily, thanks so much. It was really interesting, really cool.